I'm doing really, really well. This is Jessica. Jessica, I'm just going to finish up my little talk about, EFT and memories. And this is probably resonates with what you do as well. I know you do, is it EMDR? And you kind of work on that emotional, energetic route as well.
Absolutely. EMDR, emotion focused therapy.
Yes. So I'm just going to kind of finish it up. And what I'd like all of our viewers and also the viewers that are going to watch the replay to do is right now, think of a belief or something that you have going on in your life, okay, that brings up for you. And this is where you can feel it in your gut, in your chest, in your throat, or in your head, or actually could be even a physical pain that shows up. That chronically, when you think of this or when you experience this, this shows up. And at the end of today, I'd like to do some actually hands-on EFT, some tapping, so we can clear some of that and you can feel the physical relief before we leave the show. Isn't that the best, right? We can talk about changing our mindset and what we need to do, but what I love to do, especially in front of my audiences, is I love that hands-on experience. If you got pain, and actually if you have physical pain, I know it's probably not pleasant for you, but it's better for me because if you can give your pain a number and then we can alleviate some of that physical pain as well, the relief is what we're going for. We're going for relief in anything that we do. We want to feel that ease, that relief, that peace within us. So that being said, I think this is the perfect tie-in to introduce Jessica Rosin. Is it Rosin or Rosin?
Rosin.
Rosin, Jessica Rosin. I know that you're a registered psychologist. I did a little bit of background on you, but what we like to do here on the bLU Talks Flip Your Script stage is have you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your journey and how you ended up here today, actually.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. A little bit about myself. I mean, right now, as you said, I'm a registered psychologist. I'm also a relationship weaver and part of a family. I have my partner, I have my 3 kids. And a lot of what's kind of brought me today to this date as relationship weaver has a lot to do with kind of like the beginning. When you talk about psychology, we always go back into childhood. Really, we like to think future, we like to think positive, but it's so important for us to get connected to our childhood, where we came from, where a lot of our patterns actually began. And for me, my story actually really begins when I was training as a psychologist, kind of those early days when I was working with different people and I was hearing a large volume of different stories. I was working with a lot of different people and just noticing the different sorts of traumas that they experienced throughout their life and the great effects that it had on them. And for myself, it really was a moment for me to kind of flip and look back on myself and kind
Flip
of
your
go,
script, so to speak.
yeah, that definitely came at some point for sure. But it was like, this moment of self-awareness to go, you know what? I've really come from a lot of trauma myself. I've come from a lot of different sorts of experiences. And it was kind of just a moment of looking back in time and going, what have I been through throughout my life that has affected me in certain ways that perhaps I'm even unaware of. And it was really shocking, actually, when I took that moment and then what followed was like many moments, hours, years of looking deep within and noticing, the sorts of experience I had as a child with my parents, with my dad, who's an alcoholic and he was a violent man. And, with us as kids and my mom finally finding that space, that strength within her for us to leave and then bring us into the city. We kind of went from the farm, on the farm as a family, quite isolated, and then into the big city.
So when you say big city, where are you? You're in Canada, right?
Yeah, I'm in Canada, Edmonton, Alberta.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a moment of actually, for me as a kid, I was quite excited. I was excited about the move. I know kids can have mixed feelings about that sort of thing, but for me, it was about kind of a freedom and a sense of safety that we were headed towards. And what I quickly found myself though in was, entering into the schools and new people. And for me, not really being heavily socialized, it was quite an awkward experience and finding myself in positions of being bullied and picked on and just feeling like quite anxious. When I look back, just realizing the amount of anxiety that I experienced and fear, really at the end of the day, the fear that I experienced when it came to people. and just over time finding myself kind of moving throughout the years and eventually in relationships with different boys and different men. And I really had to look at what really are my was my relationship pattern with these men, and what kind of experience did I have? How comfortable was I with them? Was I able to really express myself? And unfortunately, what I quickly discovered was I wasn't. And if anything, there was ways in which I was pushed down more, and I didn't have a voice. I couldn't find my voice. And at the time, actually, come to think of it, when I was in my psychology training, I was married. I was married with three young kids. And again, it was this moment of looking like, what kind of relationship am I in? What kind of life am I leading? And on the outside, it actually looks really great. Kind of moving forward with my career, highly successful, even throughout the years with academically, I really put a lot of time into to school. It was that area that I kind of put my energy into. And, married, had a home, three kids, had the yard that I always wanted for my kids. It was actually a life that even my friends and family thought that was quite successful and something that I should be extremely happy with. But when I looked at my marriage and the relationship with my husband, it was just those moments of noticing, wow, we really don't connect very much. We really don't talk very often. He actually at the time was an alcoholic and was quite unavailable. And it was really just me and the kids and me pursuing, my career and my schooling. But I was quite alone and deep down inside felt really crappy about myself, had like extremely low self-confidence. And this was a real wake up call to me. It was just amazing to realize that all those years, it was almost like survival mode, kind of surviving, going through the motions, checking off the boxes that basically we're taught that we're supposed to check off. And that's what makes us a successful and happy life. And for me, it was kind of really noticing on a body level, kind of bringing in the emotion focus piece on a
Mm-hmm.
body level, how am I really feeling? And it was just this extremely deep feeling of depression, actually. If I really sat back and I looked at it. And, there was this one pivotal moment for me, actually. And I was in my garage at the time. I always seem to remember the setting of this.
I always
And I was
like to ask how old. Like for me, like as I'm hearing a story, like I want to know how old you were when you moved to the city. I want to know how old you are when you went to started studying psychology. Like how old were you are when you were married? Like so how old were you when you were in your garage at least? Let's
when I
start
was in my
there.
garage, I want to place myself at about 30.
Okay. This way I have a visual, you know what I mean? For my own
Yeah,
personal, like since you're taking me on a journey, I want to know how old you were.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I want to say around 30, could have been 31, something like that. Yeah. And just really sitting there and, so kind of feeling pretty good, with where I was at in my life at that age. But in the garage, it was like all of this was really kind of adding up, kind of taking on. It was as though I went through these years without fully realizing everything that had happened to me in my life and deep down inside how I really felt about it. And it came to me like in a real sort of rush. And I
Mm-hmm.
kept digging and digging. And the more I dug, the worse I felt about myself, though. The worse that I was kind of thinking, if I've come from so much bad, kind of so many, not good experiences, and so many experiences that basically reinforced for me my unworthiness, reinforced for me in ways that I wasn't good, I wasn't valuable, I wasn't important. My own husband didn't really want to spend time with me or the kids. And I actually got to a place of wanting to kill myself. I just sat there in the garage. I actually had my eyes closed and just was going, there's just really nothing. I'm nothing. That moment of like, I am nothing.
Yes.
And it was this moment when there was like almost like, it's difficult to describe, but there was just this incoming sort of message, a part of me, as something that came to me. And it was like, wait a minute. If I'm so bad, if I am so nothing, how have I come this far?
Mm-hmm.
How have I been able to, do the sort of schooling that I have, socialize enough, just socialize enough to be able to make myself get to the point where I was when it came to certain friends, certain family members, being in a sort of a relationship. I was at this place and this point again professionally as well, where I was noticing people weren't treating me the same way that I had been treated for most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this moment of being able to see this glimpse, this kind of glitter of something more, something different about me than what
Mm-hmm.
all of that has led me to believe about myself. So it was a
Right.
real shifting point for me.
We call it a flip. It was an aha. It was a perspective shift. Because life is,
Absolutely.
and it was what I was talking about. I don't know if you were able to catch a little bit of it. Like I was winging it, doing my improv before you showed up. I'm talking about like our perspective is our reality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just is. Like it's every single time the way that we're perceiving the world, that we're looking through the lens of, right, our own eyes, the lens of our own beliefs, our own truths, our own thoughts, is the reality that we're living in. We're the star of that show, right? And you had a perspective shift, and your whole reality changed in the garage. I mean, to me, that's one of those exciting aha moments.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
one thought, right? It was one awareness and one perspective shift that changed everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely everything. And it changed the way I saw myself. It changed the way I saw my situation, my circumstances. It changed the way I saw the world, even,
Yeah.
looking out of the garage. Yeah.
I get excited about that because
Mm-hmm.
those are the game-changing moments, the life-changing moments. And so when you had that aha moment in the garage, and so then what started to unfold, because what I find in my life and also in the lives of my clients and people, even just friends and family, is when our perspective starts to shift, everything starts showing up differently. Then there's a whole other set of challenges. When everything starts to show up the way you want it, you got to learn how to, what I call, ride the wave. You have to ride the wave of manifestation, right? Because that's a whole other thing that we can talk about another time. But what started to show up differently for you in that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest things for me was the way that I was tuning into myself. That
Mm-hmm.
was probably one of the biggest places that I started with. I was tuning into myself, tuning into my body, noticing what it was telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing that was extremely significant for me is this real examination about who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Um, where am I going? I had those three questions. Who am I? Where am I going? And who am I bringing with me?
Oh, I like the third one.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was really significant for me, especially looking at my marriage and my relationship, which was extremely scary. I mean, this is something that you
How old
can't
were your kids
unsee.
at that time? You know, I like the little details. So how old were your children? So you have three kids. You're like 31 in the garage. You're like contemplating life, having this aha moment that you can't ignore because now you can't unknow what you now know.
Yeah, absolutely. My kids, this is all guesstimations, but I would
It's
say
okay.
something
We don't really
around,
know, but just on a roundabout.
they're young, like 6, 4, and 2.
Okay. Young.
Yeah, yeah,
The
very young
trifecta
kids.
age.
Yes, yeah.
Now you were already studying at this time, right?
Hmm.
So what inspired you to go into psychology, right? Because that's also like something inspired that action too, right? Like there must have
Yeah,
been an interest
absolutely.
or a curiosity on some level.
What's interesting is I always recall that I had a shifting point around 12 years old. Since I've been 12, that I knew I was going to be a psychologist. It was just,
Hmm.
this is what I'm going to do. It actually has been a driving force for me throughout some of the difficult times in my high school years, especially, that I had this basically beacon. This is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. I didn't really put a lot of questioning or thought into it. It was as though this is
You
what I'm
just
going to
knew.
do. I just knew. And, I do wonder about it sometimes. And of course, as kids going through a divorce and separation, I did have exposure to some psychologists through the divorce settlement. But
Right.
it was, there wasn't actually a moment in my conscious awareness that this is what I'm going to do. And this is exactly what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it. It was just a knowing. And in a lot of ways, it was a lot of just who I am and the way my personality is. And, for example, and a lot of that was born from some of the traumatic experiences, from the traumatic environments, more specifically. And so for me, being in, and this happens for a lot of people, when you're in an unsafe environment, you really turn inward. You turn to your imagination. You spend a lot more time in nature, and you spend a lot of time observing people, right? A lot of time observing, for example, especially people who you're afraid of, you're going to be observing, you're going to be noticing. And so there was just from a young age, this is really just what I did with people was I noticed, what they're going to do, how people talk, what's kind of behind what their motivations. And so I already started really young noticing patterns in that way.
Yes, I can, and actually, I can really. It's funny that you said that because I haven't really thought about it that much. I didn't go into psychology in the traditional sense, but as a mindset architect and studying EFT and understanding and having this ability, this like innate ability, almost like a knowing when I was a kid that I don't know, like I knew I would work with children. Now I didn't realize I was going to be working with inner children as well. Chronological age is irrelevant really to me because I'm always end up working with a child anyway. But just kind of knowing, like having that knowing and not knowing really where it's coming from. But also knowing, I think too, as a child, you're bringing up all of these, memories, going through a divorce, going through my parents' divorce at the age of 7, realizing like how crushing that was. Just the way that I felt in relationship to what was happening, not so much observing them or outside of myself, but observing myself in the situation.
Yeah.
And recognizing that, wow, that really sucks, like, and I just had this knowing that I could help people through that process so it wouldn't suck so much and they could find a way actually to find themselves in that because it really was my parents' choice. They were going through their own story, doing the best that they can with where they were and what they knew. And even, coming from an abusive family, the abusive parent, it's not like we condone their actions, but they're really doing the best they can with where they are and what they know, even though it doesn't seem like that to a child. And so having that new awareness and understanding, I'm sure helped you through a lot of that trauma as well. So you said that you're a relationship weaver. That's the first time I've heard that term, and I really love it because I love that creative way of expressing who we are and what we do. So can you tell us a little bit more about like your ability to weave help people weave their relationships? Is it with themselves? Is it within couples? There's many different relationships that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so for me, my journey was something that I really noticed over time is how much the intimate relationships or relationships with partners has a lot to do with the unfolding of my own story, a lot to do with me diving even deeper into my own wounds, me diving even deeper into my own gifts, my wholeness, especially is something that's really been cultivated through pleasant and unpleasant experiences. In a lot of ways, the unpleasant experiences that can happen in relationships just kind of can birth something new within that. And so just noticing my own story and my own experiences and my own growth, my own journey because of this really brought a lot of my own kind of model, my own theory, my own model when it comes to relationships and what sorts of ingredients can contribute to a certain sort of healthy relationship. And I put it healthy in kind of quotation marks because there's all different ways we can consider what healthy actually means.
Right. It's so personal.
It's very personal. Absolutely. And so for me, it's about looking at kind of the relationship as 3 different bodies. And so we have the relationship when it comes to each individual, so each body, and body being the entirety of the person.
Right.
And then the third one is the relationship body. And this is really different than a lot of people.
Can you repeat number 1 again? So number 1 is the first one.
Number one is each individual. So 1 individual, 2 individuals, then the relationship as the third.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Okay. Following.
And this is really different than a lot of people where they can consider the idea of relationship as like two kind of combine in this way. And
Mm-hmm.
instead, I really prioritize looking at each as the individual pieces,
And what?
and really looking at that each personal journey of each individual, just how important that is. And I think that's something that's so overlooked or kind of like acknowledged, but then we kind of move on. Or a lot of people come to couples counseling and relationship therapy, and they just really want to focus on relationship and how we mingle, what we do here. But first, we have to really look at each individual's experiences, journey, and story, and the way and patterns, and the way that then contributes
Mm-hmm.
to this third body that's created by the contribution of each individual, but also everything else around it. It's its own entity. It's not just 1 + 1, it's 2. It's actually its own separate sort of
I
thing.
I love that you've taken that approach, because oftentimes, somebody who's doing, working in couples therapy, they do work with a couple. I personally never work with my couples together. They're always individual, and then they take their journey as these well-beings and find their way together. And I love that you take that next step where you say, okay, we're going to be here and here. Let's figure out who you are. Come in as two whole people, and then you bring them together. I like that third step. I think that could be very powerful.
Yeah,
It's very
absolutely
powerful.
it is. And there's a way, when we think about the weaving of it, it is the weaving of each
Hmm.
individual story, and the weaving of each individual story and the way that interacts and connects as the relationship. But,
Right.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is even when we kind of feel like we're there, it's like, okay, yeah, we're doing this. We have to remember we're still two different individuals. There's a lot of people that experience almost like a lack of freedom in relation. There's an ownership thing that's happened. There's expectations, which is a
Mm.
really big thing. And, the more and more that I continue to work with this, it's heading into this new type of idea of like, what is relationship really all
Hmm.
about? We have
Right.
kind of the older models, and in a lot of ways, the older models based on more like survival mode. Like, people were together in a lot of ways to be able to survive, to have
Right.
enough money, to have enough food, to have shelter. And that really contributed to why we're making this decision to be together and why we're making decisions to never be apart, like to not separate.
Right.
Um, and now there's a lot for a lot of cultures and a lot of societies, that's not as much as the motivator to stay together because we financially need to.
Hmm.
Instead, there's kind of like, well, then why are we together? People are actually looking at this a little bit more. Am I
Right.
actually happy? Do I need to stay with this if I'm not happy or fulfilled? And so that's when we start to tease that apart more.
It's interesting because, we all have our own personal journey, and I love how things start to show up in my life. And I'm on a journey right now. I'm actually in Maine. I live in Florida, and I have my RV, and I've been traveling for about a month, and it is a journey on my own. And my fiance and I have both decided that, this is the time that we're taking to kind of, what he calls it, finding Elliot. His name is Elliot, finding Elliot. And this is also, it's a time to discover, like, where are we at? We're creating these amazing things, these retreats where people's lives are changing and they're loving every minute of it. Are we loving every minute of it together? Right. And it's really, really important to take that time. And we had a guest on yesterday, and we were talking about happiness is a state of, we are happiness. And when we're disconnected from that, or out of alignment, as I call it, from that happiness, we could use the relationship as a reason. But what I'm personally recognizing for myself in the relationship, and maybe this is something that resonates with you as well when you were in the garage having that aha moment, is that whatever's coming up in me, this lack of feeling happy, or these questioning, or the sadness that had been lying dormant, whatever's coming up for me is already in me. He's just this beautiful gift, even though frustrating at times. Love you anyway, Elliot, but frustrating at times, letting me know that it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So pointing my finger and saying I'm unhappy because of this, that's not sustainable. I'm unhappy because the situation's bringing up something in me that's already in me, right? That's already taking up space, that could be filled with more inner peace or contentment, or, just being happy because I'm looking at the world as a happy person. So do you find that too on your own personal journey, but do you also see that awareness show up with your clients, or patients? I'm not sure what the term is
Hmm.
since you're a psychologist. Well, I work with a lot of coaches, so we don't have patients, we have clients. That there's an awareness that really my unhappiness is not coming from anything but within myself, or my, mistrust or insecurities or whatever it is that's holding space. But whatever's showing up is providing me this mirror and this opportunity for me to recognize that this stuff is within me already. Nobody's putting it in me, right? Nobody's like shoving anger in me or insecurities in me, but it's already there, and it's an opportunity to kind of go within and say, where's this coming from? How old is it? How old is this, crap that's still hanging out, within me? What age am I right now? That's a big question that I ask myself and my clients. How old is this? How old do I feel right now? I'm 17. You're bringing out the 17-year-old in me that wasn't very happy with herself, or the 5-year-old who doesn't want to be abandoned. Or do you find that there are those different parts of ourselves that show up in situations?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you brought that up too, because that is a module, like a part of our work that we really do when it comes to working with relationships. We're looking at the different parts of ourselves. We even have names for them. I actually have a relationship archetype assessment that I have online
I
for people
love
to
it.
take. Yes, exactly. And so that you can discover what sorts of archetypes, what sort of parts of yourself are more active, right? Kind of are stronger, louder, which ones are a
Mm-hmm.
little less. And that's different archetypes and different parts of ourself that are protective, can hold us back. But there's
Mm-hmm.
also parts of ourself that help us to grow, and that where we can show up more fully and more in our wholeness for ourselves. So we want to get a sense of what parts of ourself are more active and inactive for us, and which ones kind of get triggered up, do we get hijacked by in
Mm-hmm.
our partnership, for example.
Right.
And quite often with couples, what you can do is begin to see which parts of themselves end up communicating more with each other than other
Yes,
parts of ourselves.
exactly. Sometimes I'm like, do you know that, I mean, and I work separately, but I'll have the conversation. Do you know that both of your 13-year-olds are in this marriage? Both of
Yes.
your 15-year-olds are the ones that are constantly arguing with each other. So your
Yeah,
teenage versions of yourself are the ones having this relationship. Like, are you ready to like let
absolutely.
them have the control, or do you want, the 30, 40, 50-year-old version of yourself to show up and say, hey, wait a second, you know what? I'm ready to make this happen in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, what can be really difficult for, I almost say most couples, because a lot of couples haven't really looked at this, is there's this moment when they discover that they made the decisions to be in their relationship from a younger part of themselves.
Right.
That decision, that choice, what feels like a choice that they made, their selection of, this is who I want to be with for the rest of my life kind of idea, was motivated, if it came from a younger, less developed, maybe less mature part of themselves, was motivated by less mature needs and desires and motivations. So it kind of translates in the unspoken contract or agreement that we have in this relationship is based on you act from a 15-year-old position and I act from a 13-year-old. And this is what keeps us, this is what sustains us actually. This is what keeps us going. And
Exactly.
it can be really heartbreaking because then once we realize something like this, it's like it is one of those flipping the script or those shifting moments of, wow, like who are you then? Who am I? Right. That's
Mm-hmm.
when this real discovery process even reflects my own personal story with it. Like, and what sorts of decisions have I made to choose you, to be with you, in order just to keep myself safe, as opposed to perhaps growing and expanding and being that fuller person that I'm beginning to see more about me.
Yes.
So it's,
So
yeah,
profound. It really, really is profound. And at the same time, though, there's this opportunity that I feel like we have within that whole kind of scene, right? Because it's a scene in our movie of life, to take a look at it and say, okay, so if this is where I'm at and this is where you're at, and I can now recognize that it isn't the me that's showing up, and start to heal those things within those versions, there is a beautiful opportunity to grow together. There,
Very good.
because we don't even know who the other version is. Like, I don't know your 40-year-old version that really could be showing
Yeah.
up, because I've been hanging out with your 15-year-old all this time,
Yeah.
And I think another thing too is, this whole idea of relationships and love, and even with family and kids and friends, the reason that I believe, this is personal, that we're attracted to certain relationships is, and we love the person or the relationship, is because we love the version of us that shows up in that relationship.
Hmm.
Right? It's how we feel about ourselves, when who's the version of us that's showing up. Oh, you're my best friend because I love how I feel when I hang out with you, right? Or I'm in love with you because I really love the version of myself that's showing up. And sometimes that gets lost, of course. But I know that in my own journey right now, on this journey that I'm on right now, one of the things that Elliot and I both discovered together is that, sometimes in our interactions, we don't like the versions of ourselves that show up. It's not our intention. It just, this version of us is showing up, and we don't like who we are or how we feel when that version shows up. And that's what we get to look at. Not that you did this to me and you did that to me. Like, we're able to now say, and this is kind of where we're at, I'm sharing like a real time, real life experience, is that both of us agree, which is great, because we both agree we don't like who we are when we're showing up in interactions, certain interactions with each other. So now what do we do, right?
Yeah.
Not just become the best version for ourselves, but if we're really in this, then figure out how to be the best version for the other person as well, while still retaining who we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. It absolutely makes a lot of sense. And, kind of even going back to what you were saying too, is like this opportunity, having this awareness, and that's the first step to a change, is about, recognizing that this is where we're at and we have this opportunity now to do something different. And there's a decision point within that. And so when you have two people that kind of awaken to this, and I think that a lot of people experience that. I hear a lot of women, it happens for men as well, but a lot of women really talk about when they're awakening more and they're
Mm-hmm.
realizing some of this, they're finding that their husbands aren't or their partners aren't. And that's such a difficult situation for anybody. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really alone feeling. And this speaks to my personal story back when I was in the garage and in my marriage at the time, of kind of realizing these things for me, realizing these different parts of me showing up or not showing up. And in my case, my husband chose to not continue on with that journey in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that not wanting to kind of take that opportunity. And it really puts people in that kind of position of, well, then what? What do I do with that? And I really find it so important to empower people to be able to kind of continue to follow their journey and follow their story with that, to be able to make those decisions that won't hold them back in the ultimate growth and individuation of themselves. And so it's a really difficult kind of position. But I think people out of fear, and because it's a really scary situation,
Like, what's going
um,
to happen?
exactly, I would choose to kind of maybe, I'm just going to like put my head back in the sand. I'm just going to, kind of continue on and not really touch this anymore because, for example, my partner doesn't really want to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we fast forward to the present for myself now at age 42, I'm in a relationship for the last, 7 years, where the opportunities, are really embraced, as you're describing for yourself as well,
Mm-hmm.
where basically when we notice triggers, when we notice different parts of ourselves, it's really holding that bigger picture of the story that's continuing to unfold of our own individual journeys. But in a lot of ways, the way the relationship helps to bring that up, helps
Right.
to be able to bring it forward. But we have something more. It's almost like at times it can feel like a crisis. You can feel like, oh my God, things aren't going well like they were going. But
Right.
each time, if both people are willing to say yes again and again to that opportunity, it's just amazing. And this is what I find so beautiful about the magic of relationships, is
Mm-hmm.
what can be birthed from that. what can be birthed from these moments of, sometimes you can feel stuck, or it can feel like, you know what, we don't like each other, or whatever the situation is. And when you lean into it more, that's where the true growth happens. That's where that real growing of
Right.
self can happen.
Well, and actually, not can, it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, like gravity, it does.
It just does.
It just starts to like, it presents itself, you know, and
Yeah.
and present is a present, right? It starts to present itself, like, and so it's beautiful. I know Corey hopped on because we're coming to a close, and I have to tell you, I adore you, and I would love to stay in contact, and I want to find out where I personally can get the archetype download. So maybe that's where we can start too. Where can people find you? Like, just to start a conversation about, you know, maybe finding out how to weave the relationship within themselves and in their partnership.
Absolutely. So I can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and I also have my website, jessicarosinspsychology.com. And so
Perfect.
there's a lot of resources actually that are there on at my website, as well as the free relationship archetype assessment.
I love that. And do you use that assessment when working with your patients?
Oh, for sure.
Clients
Yeah.
or patients? Are they patients?
I call them clients.
Okay, you do. Okay.
Clients with, yeah.
In working with your clients. Okay, so it also in so two things. If you could put that in the comments, at least on the Flip Your Script Blue Talks group on Facebook, that would be great. So people who are watching the replay can find you. And then also, I like to ask this question, and that this is in relationship to the whole flipping your script concept. I believe that we have thought weeds and mind seeds. And the mind seeds are what we can use to replace once we pull a thought weed and we know that that's not how we want to think anymore, or this is not working for us, right? Sometimes people have a really hard time figuring out what it is they do want because we spent so much time trying to get rid of what we don't want that we've lost focus. So if you could share maybe a mind seed or a thought or a perspective with our audience and our future audience, what would that one maybe perspective shift that they could plant in place of be?
I have many.
Okay,
But
pick your favorite.
one that comes to mind right now is I absolutely deserve the fully exciting, robust relationship that I really desire, that I truly desire.
Okay, so one more time. Well, okay, so so you're saying that everybody deserves the best version of themselves and the happiest relationship that they could have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, you deserve it, right?
Yeah.
You don't even have to believe that you deserve it at the time, but just know that you deserve it. And I think that those things show up once we kind of can get into that. I deserve it, even though maybe I don't know that I do, because it takes the pressure off. It kind of clears the path a little bit more for it to show up.
It does. It really is another way of saying yes.
Exactly. Well, it was such a pleasure getting to share this time with you. Corey, we kind of missed you, but I love you. But I think we did good, right?
Oh, yeah. It was great. It was so wonderful to meet you too.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know that our paths will cross again, and I'll stay in touch for sure. How was your time away, Corey?
It was interesting.
Okay. Leave it at that.
But I was going to say too, Jessica, I definitely want to have an opportunity to interview you in the near future as well. So let's call it a to be continued. Whenever we set the schedule for this event, which was we set it about, I think 3 weeks or a month ago, maybe a little more. But like 4 months ago in my calendar was locked 3 things this week that I couldn't then change because they were locked in so far. And it just happened that 2 of them landed today. But the weird irony is we had some hiccups with the technology on the other interview. And so we went through the hiccups for about 15 minutes and then we decided to reschedule. So,
oh, great.
And on top of that, at least I'm going to be with you till the end because my second person messaged me and said the Wi-Fi is down in his neighborhood for the first time in his life.
Look at that.
So we moved that one to next week at this exact same time when I don't have the Flip Your Script. So Jessica, that's all to say that if you're with your permission, I'll call it a to be continued, and maybe I'll bring you on either for my podcast, or I know Elise might want to bring you on for the Flip Your Script Fridays.
For sure.
Again. So lots of interview opportunities still to come is the point.
Okay,
Awesome.
before we let you go though, this is something that I introduced at the beginning, Corey, when you weren't there, is that I would like to do a quick little tapping session, an EFT session with anyone who's watching and or for the replay. So Jessica, if you have something that keeps popping up for you that you can physically feel is holding you back on some level, like whether you feel it in your gut, your chest, your throat, or in your head, I'm going to do a quick little, like what I call a tapping rant or a tapping session at the end, just a quick 3-minute. So feel free to hop back on or hang out.
Okay, good. That sounds awesome.
Very cool. Well, like I said, Jessica, I didn't get to be here for most of the interview, but I know it was a pleasure, and I know you and Elise crushed it, and I'll get a chance to watch it later, which is exciting because I get to watch from the outside looking in. But thank you so much for being you. Thank you for showing up. You've been a big part of our Blue Talks community since pretty much the start, and I don't anticipate that changing. We'll keep spreading the word and waving the flag for all the great things you're doing. And like I said, feel free to circle back with me and hold me accountable that I want to make it a to be continued and bring you back on.
Oh, great. Thanks so much, Corey. I look forward to it.